But first, it's becoming pretty clear, isn't it, as to how the Prime Minister intends to respond to the massacre of Jews at Bondi. He wants to make Sunday's atrocity all about too many guns, rather than too much Jew hatred. About the guns themselves, rather than the anti-Semitic evil that motivated the men who fired them. And in doing so, he would hope he'll get away without taking any responsibility at all for his role as our national leader for allowing this hatred to all but go unchecked. Because it is his failure to show leadership that's allowed hate-filled words to metastasise into gunshots. Because making it about gun control alone, he thinks, will get him off the hook.
The consideration that will take place includes limiting the number of guns an individual can own, the type of guns that are legal, whether gun ownership should require Australian citizenship, and accelerating work on the National Firearms Register.
Clearly, Albanese is trying to equate Sunday's massacre with Port Arthur, even though that was an act of personal evil, while this was an atrocity motivated by religious hatred, by radical Islamist hatred. What this government can't and won't admit, as Susan Lee pointed out yesterday, is that it's treated Jew hatred as a problem that they have to manage away rather than an evil to be eradicated. From the Prime Minister down, they've looked through this and a political prism, not one on principle. Their political obsession with protecting Muslim votes in Labor seats, and their solidarity with hard-left activists that have marched their hate through our city streets on a near-weekly basis since October 7. And when they could have done something, the Prime Minister and his government have done next to nothing. Nothing when radical Islamist preachers rejoiced in the October 7 slaughter of men, women and babies.
I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage.
Nothing still when an angry mob filled with anti-Jewish hate was escorted by police onto the steps of the Opera House.
Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews?
When 100,000 people too streamed across the Sydney Harbour Bridge, with many of them demanding death to the IDF and globalise the Intifada. Again, no action from the government that we elect to keep every Australian safe. But as we know, as history has shown us, if people get away with inciting violence, sooner or later violence happens, as the Holocaust impacted family tree of almost every Jewish Australian bears witness. Months and months we've had of hand-wringing, mistruths and political dithering, and that can't be washed away by a Prime Minister laying a wreath after the event when all people wanted and needed from him was action to stop the incitement, not the sympathy afterwards. The reason these 15 innocents were gunned down at Bondi is not supposedly inadequate gun laws, as much as they might warrant review, but inadequate leadership from the top. Inadequate, woeful, miserable leadership from a man who leads a government that has failed not just the dead, but failed all Australians, horrified that this massacre occurs here in our midst. What the Prime Minister's trying to do here is use the issue of gun laws to avoid an overdue national debate on Jew hatred and the rise of radical Islam. And yet it's what drives people to kill that matters a whole lot more than how they kill. Now, after all, it's been confirmed by police today that the car registered to the younger man, Naveed Akram, found at the scene contained explosive devices. Now, if that had caused the loss of life on Sunday and not the guns, what would have been the Prime Minister's response? He couldn't have hidden behind gun reform then, surely. If it had been a knife attack, what then?
Also confirmed that the vehicle, which is registered to the younger male, contained IEDs.
The Prime Minister and his frontbench should not insult our intelligence or infantilise us by trying to make this about something other than Jew hatred that they have monumentally failed to deal with. I don't think the public will fall for this ruse, certainly not if the reception for Tony Burke last night is any guide.
Shame on you, Tony Burke! Shame! What have you done? You have left this country. This is your fault. Well done. Blood on your hands, Tony Burke. Who's it? Shame on you.
Remember, this is the government that started criticising Israel almost as soon as military operations against Hamas had begun, whose foreign minister failed even to visit the areas where those terrorists killed so many, when finally she was shamed into visiting Israel. A government that ratcheted up its rhetoric against Israel before announcing that it would officially recognise Palestine in a giant concession to those demanding that Palestine be free from the river to the sea. It's a government that's routinely refused visas to hardline members of the Israeli government, but that's never withdrawn the visa of a single hate preacher, or to my knowledge, ever prosecuted one. And they don't need new laws for any of this. They just need to enforce the existing ones. Today, the Prime Minister, in his press conference, tried to make it as much about community mental health as about Islamist terrorism, reeling off a list of mental health hotlines at the start of his press conference. And this, despite the fact that the new Federal Police Commissioner conceded what we all knew to be true after we first learned of the presence of 2 homemade Islamic State flags in the car of the killers.
Early indications point to a terrorist attack inspired by Islamic State, allegedly committed by a father and son.
We've also learned today of the links between the younger killer and the Dawa Islamic Centre in Sydney, the place responsible for hate-spewing preachers like this.
By Allah, the day you will be kicked out of Palestine is coming. A day when the stones and the trees will speak and say, "O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him."
Last night, as I picked up and I showed you, when asked about the fact the Sun was on ASIO's radar in 2019, the Prime Minister, well, he'd only tell you this.
He was examined on the basis of being associated with others, and the assessment was made that there was no indication of any ongoing threat or threat of him engaging in violence.
What he left out there now, we know, don't we, that those others were an Islamic State terror cell. Nor did he confess that the son and father had both recently travelled to a terrorist hotspot in the Philippines, spending a month there. What was that about? Training or planning connected with Sunday's attack? Only time will tell. But I am not the only one who has remarked that the way they both moved with those guns had the telltale look of military training. And so, knowing all of this and those demonstrable links to Islamic State, you've got to wonder why on earth the Albanese government was so willing to work in secret to bring back to this country women who had cooperated with Islamic State and their children, some reportedly close to adulthood themselves. Now, why? Why would we import more hate? Today, the Prime Minister admitted that Islamic State was, quote, a perversion of Islam. And then, incredibly, he said this.
What terrorists seek to do is to create division, is to create conflict, is to undermine social cohesion.
No, Prime Minister. Not division, not to undermine. What they are trying to do is to kill Australians. And the radical Islamist ideology that drives them to kill has to be called out at every opportunity. It must be called out. And if you won't do it, if you cannot do it, then Albanese, you need to go. This is a line in the sand for Australia. And looking at the lines of those giving blood, those calling in to radio stations, what Australians are telling reporters on the street, people are barely able to restrain their anger as politicians walk around the streets of Bondi. And finally, I have hope that we might get our country back, because this is now the silent majority speaking. Even the media today were rightly copying their just desserts.
And ABC, I've got to say, will you cut out the biased reporting? Mainstream media, we feel will you cut it out? Will you actually let us have a voice? Because we feel that part of the reason that the Jewish people have experienced such a massive change in Australia towards us. And ABC, please stop with the biased reporting.
Earlier today, around lunchtime, it was my honour to host a Hanukkah event at Parliament House in Melbourne, where both the Premier and the Opposition Leader spoke to a large crowd from Melbourne's Jewish community. And I ended the event on a personal note. I said, as someone who studied history at school and university, I used to ask myself, what would I have done if I had been born at another time in another place? Would I have spoken out against evil? Would I have stood silent as I watched Nazis drag my neighbours from their homes? And I said to myself,
I never want to be that person. We stand with you, all the non-Jewish Victorians and Australians stand with you. You are in our hearts and in our prayers. And out of this time of great darkness, let there be light.